It was one of those gray evenings where the world felt like it was holding its breath. Sky painted with clouds heavy as secrets, trees standing still as if they too were waiting for something to happen. Julia Carter, a 34-year-old single mom, had just tucked her 8-year-old son Liam into bed. Her little countryside home sat quietly on the edge of a forgotten road in West Virginia, the kind of place where strangers rarely passed and visitors were even rarer. She was washing the last plate in the sink, lost in the silence of the moment, when the knock came. Not one of those hesitant, polite taps. No, this was firm, sharp, urgent. Her heart skipped. She grabbed the dish towel and wiped her hands quickly, instinctively glancing toward Liam's room, then tiptoeing to the door. When she opened it, her breath caught. There they stood, 6 men, soaked to the bone, shadows under their eyes, faces carved by exhaustion. Their uniforms were torn, stained with mud, and patched with makeshift stitches. Some clutched their sides as if hiding pain. Others didn't even look up, too tired or ashamed. But one of them did. He took a step forward, his voice low but steady. "Ma'am," he said, "may we come in?" Julia froze, not because she feared them, but because something deep inside her recognized the weight they carried. It was in their posture, their silence, their bruised pride. They weren't just soldiers. They were men who had been broken and still stood tall. Her eyes fell to their uniforms again, then to their bare hands trembling from the cold. She hadn't seen anything like this since the news reports last year about a covert mission that went wrong. But the government had gone silent since then. Could these be those missing men? Before her logic could answer, her heart already had. She opened the door wider and stepped aside. "Come in," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Please." She had no idea that decision would change her life, and her son's, forever. If this moment touched you, don't forget to like this story and subscribe for more powerful. Sometimes healing begins not with words but with silence shared over warm soup and flickering firelight. The living room, once quiet and untouched, was now filled with unfamiliar shadows. Julia moved quickly between the soldiers, handing them towels, warm blankets, and steaming cups of tea. They didn't ask questions. They didn't explain. But there was a quiet understanding hanging in the air, as if none of them were quite ready to say what had happened. Liam peeked out from the hallway, curiosity shining in his big green eyes. Julia gently called him over. "It's okay, sweetheart. These men, they're guests." One of the younger soldiers, barely older than 20, gave a soft smile and a little wave. "Hi, buddy," he said, his voice raspy but kind. Liam clung to Julia's side at first, but within minutes he was sitting cross-legged on the rug beside them, handing out crackers from the pantry and asking them names. The men gave them just first names: Evan, Cole, Mason, Tyler, Jace, and Reed. There was no rank, no sir, no formality, just names, just people. Julia noticed how they kept glancing at the windows. One of them always seemed to be listening for something beyond the walls. Whatever they were running from, it hadn't let go. Over the next few days, a fragile rhythm settled in. Julia found herself making large batches of stew and borrowing extra blankets from neighbors, under the excuse of visiting relatives. The soldiers helped with chores around the property, repaired the old shed, and fixed a broken fence Liam had tripped over weeks ago. But more than that, they brought back something else to her life: safety, laughter, presence. One night, as a storm rolled in and thunder rattled the roof, Julia found herself sitting at the kitchen table with Evan, the quiet leader of the group. His eyes were shadowed but steady. "You didn't have to let us in," he said quietly, swirling his tea. "No," she replied, looking down at her hands. "But I think you were meant to be here." Their eyes met, just for a second, and in that glance something flickered. Not romance, not yet, but trust. The kind that forms slowly, layer by layer, born from kindness and survival. Outside, rain battered the windows. Inside, warmth bloomed. Not just from the fire, but from the 6 broken souls slowly becoming part of her home. And none of them said it aloud, but they all felt it. This wasn't just refuge. It was the beginning of something none of them had dared hope for. In the stillness of night, truth crept in, uninvited, undeniable, and too heavy to keep buried any longer. The storm had passed, but something heavier than rain now lingered in the air. Julia could feel it. She had tried not to ask too many questions, out of respect, out of instinct, but her mind kept circling back to the same gnawing thought. Who were these men really, and what were they running from? The answer came not with words, but with a whisper. It was Liam who found it first. He had been helping Jace clean out the old attic. Julia had told him to stay out of the locked trunk, but children have a way of finding what adults hide. He came running downstairs holding a small, tattered leather badge. "Mom, look what I found." Julia's heart stilled as she took the badge from his hands. It wasn't just military, it was classified. A black insignia etched in faded silver, the kind only issued to members of elite special ops. Evan stood in the hallway, silent, watching. She looked up at him, the question clear in her eyes. He nodded slowly. "We were part of something off the books," he said. "They told the world we died. We didn't." Julia stared, breath caught in her throat. Why would they do that? Because we saw something we weren't supposed to, and we refused to stay quiet. Tyler joined them, limping slightly. "We were guarding a transport, remote base in Alaska. There was cargo, biological, not human. They called it Project Helix. We thought it was a weapon, but it was alive." Julia felt the room tilt. "Alive?" she echoed. Evan stepped forward, voice low. "It was a child, something otherworldly. It communicated. It begged us to help it. So we did. They wanted us dead after that," Mason added grimly. "They sent drones after us. Snipers. Our own men. We've been running ever since." Silence, thick, suffocating. Julia pressed her hand to her chest, trying to steady the pounding beneath her ribs. "You're telling me you rescued an alien?" she said, the words sounding ridiculous even as she spoke them. "No," Evan said softly. "We saved a child. Doesn't matter where it came from." Her legs gave way slightly, and she sat down hard on the couch. 6 soldiers, 1 mother, and now, an interstellar secret worth killing for. She looked at Evan again. "What happened to the child?" A beat passed, then another. "She's safe," he finally said. "We think. We hope." Julia stared out the window at the distant tree line. The world outside suddenly seemed too quiet, too calm. Somewhere in the darkness, forces she couldn't imagine were already moving. And now, they knew the soldiers weren't dead. They were here, with her. Safety is a fleeting illusion when the past comes knocking. And this time, it wasn't a knock. It was a warning. It started with a flicker. The porch light blinked once, then again. A subtle pulse, easy to miss, unless you were trained to notice. Evan saw it first. He rose silently from the dining table, spoon left untouched in his bowl. Julia watched him move, something rigid in his posture. The others followed suit. All 6 soldiers standing in eerie unison, scanning the shadows beyond the windows. "What is it?" Julia asked, clutching Liam instinctively. "Laser tripwire. Someone breached the perimeter," Evan whispered, already retrieving a compact earpiece from his coat. "They found us. No sound, no shots, just movement in the trees," Cole said, peering through the curtains. "That's recon protocol. Watching, mapping, waiting." Panic crept into Julia's chest. "They know you're here?" Evan's jaw clenched. "They always knew we'd run. We just didn't think they'd follow us this far. But now, we've put you in danger too." Tyler, bruised and limping, turned to Julia with guilt in his eyes. "We can leave. We'll draw them away. You and Liam don't deserve to be caught in this." But Julia shook her head before he even finished. "You're not going anywhere. Not like that. You brought the truth to my doorstep, and whatever it is they're trying to hide, it's worth protecting." Outside, the darkness seemed to breathe. A living thing, wrapping itself around the house, coiling tighter by the second. Evan turned to the group. "Plan Delta, inside fallback, reinforce windows, shut down electronics. Jace, rig the basement as a safe zone. Julia, I know, she said, already pulling Liam toward the pantry, her secret tunnel barely wide enough for a child to crawl through. Suddenly, a sound tore through the night, a high-pitched whirring, almost insect-like. A drone zipped across the field, hovering briefly before disappearing behind the barn. Then another, then three more. They're scouting, Mason said, mapping our defenses. They're planning an extraction, Evan corrected grimly. Not ours, theirs. And they won't ask nicely. Julia's breath hitched. You said the child, the alien, was safe. What if they think it's here? That's exactly what they think, Evan said, and now they'll stop at nothing to confirm it. In that moment, something shifted in the room. Not just fear, purpose. 6 soldiers who had spent months running were now standing firm, and a mother who'd only wanted peace was preparing for war. They underestimated you, Reed said to Julia. They thought you were just a civilian. She gripped the shotgun her late father had left behind. They're about to learn I'm also a mother. And in the thick silence that followed, only one truth remained. They would have to fight for the right to survive. When fear whispers louder than hope, even the strongest hearts begin to tremble. That night felt colder than any before. Julia sat on the edge of her bed, Liam asleep beside her, clutching her arm in his tiny grip even in dreams. She brushed a hand through his soft brown hair, her chest tight with fear. She had tried so hard to give him a quiet life, a life where danger existed only in bedtime stories and superhero cartoons. Now the danger was real, and it was circling their home like a predator in the dark. Downstairs she could hear quiet voices. Evan and the others planning, arguing in hushed tones. They were trained for war, but even they were rattled. The faceless enemy hunting them wasn't just any military unit. It was something darker, covert, untraceable, government-backed, invisible until it struck. What if they didn't make it through the night? Julia's mind spiraled with doubt. Had she made a terrible mistake by letting them in? What if they had led death to her doorstep? A soft knock at the door pulled her back. Evan stood there, his silhouette bathed in hallway light. Can I come in? She nodded. He entered quietly, then sat on the opposite edge of the bed, careful not to wake Liam. I can't sleep, Julia whispered. None of us can, he said. We've all been in fire before. But this is different. We're not just fighting for ourselves anymore. She looked at him, vulnerability etched in her face. Do you really think we can survive this? Evan didn't answer right away. His jaw flexed slightly, then softened. I don't know. I want to believe we can. But there are things in this world, buried things. You don't fight with bullets. You fight them with truth, with people willing to stand even when the odds are impossible. Julia let out a long, shaky breath. I'm not a soldier, Evan. I'm just a mom who bakes cookies and works 2 shifts at the diner to keep the lights on. You're more than that, he said quietly. You opened your door when no one else would. You gave 6 broken men a reason to believe we weren't alone. And that boy? He nodded to Liam. He's still smiling. That means you're winning. But doubt still clung to her like fog. What if I can't protect him? She said, her voice cracking. What if I lose him? Evan leaned forward, his voice suddenly fierce. Then we lose everything. And that's why we fight. Not because we want to, but because we have to. A beat passed. Julia looked into his eyes, saw her own fear reflected there. But something else too. Conviction. Even in the darkest moment, someone still believed. And slowly, so did she. Hope doesn't always roar. It sometimes returns as a whisper, carried on the wind or in the warmth of a shared breath. The morning came with silence. No drones, no sounds of movement outside. Just the pale light of dawn streaming through the mist, casting long, quiet shadows across the front porch. Julia stepped outside, her coffee mug shaking just slightly in her hand. The world looked the same. Her old truck, the garden, the woods. But she knew better now. Danger could wear any face, even sunlight. She sat on the porch steps, watching her breath curl into the air when footsteps approached behind her. It was Cole, the jokester of the group, or at least he used to be before Alaska. He handed her a small object wrapped in cloth. "What's this?" she asked. "Something Mason found buried near the old barn. Thought you should have it." Julia opened the cloth slowly and gasped. Inside was a small silver charm. Not military issue, not from Earth at all. It glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. "This is," she whispered. "We think it belonged to her," Cole said, sitting beside her. "The child, the one we helped escape. She must have passed through here at some point. Maybe she's been trying to reach you." Julia stared at the charm, mesmerized. It wasn't just a relic. It was a sign that the truth mattered, that their kindness hadn't disappeared into some classified black hole, that somewhere out there, a frightened being had remembered them, and maybe had left a message. Cole continued, softer now. "We lost a lot of men, good ones, families. But the moment we helped her, none of it felt wasted. We gave someone hope. Maybe that's what keeps us going." Julia nodded slowly, her fingers curling around the charm. For the first time in days, something shifted inside her, a warmth she hadn't felt since before this all began. A reason, a purpose, not just survival, meaning. Behind them, Liam's laughter rang through the screen door as Jace let him win a game of checkers for the third time that morning. The soldiers were still battered, still hunted, but they were healing, slowly, together. Julia looked at Cole, eyes brighter than before. "Then we protect that, whatever it takes." He grinned faintly. "You're more soldier than most I've ever known." She smirked. "Don't tell Evan. He'll make me run drills." The charm pulsed once more in her hand, brighter now, as if responding to the spark of hope blooming inside her chest. For the first time in days, Julia smiled, and meant it. Sometimes the most powerful vows are born in silence, spoken not with words but through action, sacrifice, and unshakable loyalty. The day passed in a blur of repairs and watchfulness. Evan had reinforced the attic windows. Jace finished wiring the basement with emergency power. The soldiers worked in pairs now, rarely separating, eyes always scanning, ears tuned to the slightest change in wind or silence. But beneath the tension, something else grew, a quiet determination. That night, just after Liam had drifted off on the couch, curled beneath Julia's old quilt, Evan found her on the back porch. She stood looking up at the stars, arms wrapped around herself, the alien charm still looped around her wrist. He didn't say anything at first, just stood beside her, letting the night settle between them. "He wants to be brave," Julia said suddenly, her voice soft. "He sees you all and he copies how you walk, how you talk, even your salute." Evan gave a small smile. "He's got heart. He's already braver than most men I've served with." She looked down. "And if we don't make it? If they come for you tomorrow or the next day?" Evan stepped closer. "Then we'll stand between them and your door, no matter what." Julia turned to face him fully, the porch light casting a faint glow across her face. "I'm not afraid to fight, Evan, but I'm terrified of losing him." "You won't," he said firmly. "I swear it." There was no hesitation, no theatrics, just a vow from a soldier who had already lost everything once and would not lose again. Julia studied his face, every scar and shadow. This man had seen war, betrayal, death. But in this moment, she saw none of that. She saw honor, integrity, home. "You're not going to disappear on me," she said, voice trembling slightly. "Promise me, no matter what happens, we face it together." He didn't blink. "I promise." It wasn't romantic, not in the way books described it, but there was something deeper in that exchange. Sacred, unbreakable. A single mom who had risked everything to open her door. A hunted soldier who had found peace in the most unexpected place. And a child sleeping peacefully inside, unaware that two souls had just built a fortress around him with nothing but trust. As they stood there, the wind shifted. Leaves rustled. Somewhere far off, the cry of a hawk pierced the silence. A warning maybe, or a sign. But it didn't matter. They had made their promise. And come what may, they would keep it. Even in the shadow of danger, life finds a way to bloom. Quiet moments, soft smiles, and laughter that sneaks in when no one's looking. The following day felt different. Not because the threat had passed, it hadn't. Not because the skies had cleared, they hadn't either, but because something had settled in the air, something rare and powerful. Hope. Julia awoke to the smell of bacon, something she hadn't cooked in weeks. She stumbled into the kitchen in her robe to find Tyler at the stove, apron crooked on his wide frame, humming off-key to a country tune playing from a battery-powered radio. "I figured," he said sheepishly, "you deserved a hot breakfast." That, and Evan said, we needed to boost morale. Liam came sprinting in from the hallway, wooden sword in hand, shouting, "Defend the castle," as Cole chased him with a mop like a battle axe. Jace laughed from the couch, holding a cup of instant coffee like it was the finest thing in the world. Julia just stood there. For a moment, it didn't feel like they were hiding from Black Ops hunters. It didn't feel like war. It felt like family. Later that afternoon, Reed found an old soccer ball in the shed. Within minutes, the yard had transformed into a battlefield of a different kind. Boots flying, laughter ringing, shouts echoing into the trees. Liam was goalkeeper. Cole was cheating. Evan, surprisingly agile, managed a clean goal before Liam threw himself into his arms in dramatic protest. Even Julia joined in, barefoot in the grass, her dress flaring as she spun to avoid Mason's clumsy defense. Her laughter came without warning. Real, raw, healing. After the game, everyone collapsed onto the porch steps, breathless and grinning. Evan passed her a bottle of water. "Didn't know you had moves like that," Julia nudged him. "Didn't know you had a smile." He raised a brow. "You just haven't been looking hard enough." Their fingers brushed. Not an accident this time. Just a quiet connection that spoke louder than words. Liam dozed off on Mason's shoulder, the older soldier humming an old lullaby beneath his breath. The sun dipped low behind the trees, casting gold across the fields, turning the farmhouse into a sanctuary of light. No one said it aloud. No one wanted to break the spell. But in that moment, danger felt like a memory. The world felt wide again. And the love, unspoken but unmistakable, began weaving itself through every corner of the home. It wasn't peace, but it was joy. Unexpected, undeniable, and deeply earned. When peace stretches too long, it begins to feel borrowed, and every heartbeat becomes a countdown. Days passed. Remarkably, nothing happened. No drones, no black vans, no flickers in the woods. The soldiers kept rotating watch shifts, but even they began to loosen their grips. The tension that had once made every creaking floorboard sound like a gunshot slowly faded into quiet routine. The farmhouse became a strange blend of domestic life and military readiness. Julia made breakfast. Evan taught Liam how to tie knots and read maps. Reed helped fix the old well pump. The men stacked firewood for winter, rebuilt the chicken coop, and mended the rusted fencing. There was order, laughter, even comfort. But comfort, they all knew, was fragile. Then the signs started returning. First, the crows stopped gathering in the trees by the north side. Second, Julia's radio, normally fuzzy and unreliable, picked up a burst of static. Then a voice, garbled but clear enough to chill her blood. "Echo 7 located, final clearance pending." Evan confirmed it within minutes, a signal pinged from a government frequency. Buried in code but unmistakably aimed. "They've reactivated the mission," he said grimly, "and they're close." That night, the old barn caught fire. They managed to put it out before the blaze spread. But it wasn't an accident. Someone had slipped past the perimeter. Someone had left a clear message. "We're watching." The joyful warmth that had filled their days turned to steel. Shutters nailed down. Escape routes reviewed. Weapons counted and double-checked. Liam, sensing the shift, grew quiet. Julia tried to shield him from the fear returning to the air, but even a child could tell. Something was coming, and so the waiting began again. 1 week, then 2. Each day stretched thin with silence. Tension crept into every hallway. Meals were shorter, smiles rarer. Even Liam started sleeping with a flashlight clutched in one hand. Julia stood one night by the upstairs window, watching Evan in the field. He moved like a man ready for war, but tired of carrying it. When he finally came inside, she stopped him at the door. "How much longer?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. He looked at her, shoulders tense. I don't know, but they're not done. Julia placed her hand on his chest. Neither are we. Outside, the moon hung heavy, silver and full, casting a ghostly glow across the ground. Inside, time was stretching, testing, threatening to snap. But through it all, they endured. Because some families are born, others are forged in fire. After every storm, there's a stillness, the kind that whispers, you made it. Even if the world looks nothing like before, it didn't end in a battle. It ended in a decision. One morning, long before sunrise, Evan burst into the kitchen, face pale and eyes blazing. Julia was already there, heating water on the stove. One look told her everything had changed. They're coming, he said simply, with everything. How long do we have? 2 hours, maybe less. The soldiers moved like lightning, weapons packed, routes cleared. Liam was woken gently, hugged tightly, and dressed in warm layers without a single complaint. He didn't cry. He just looked up at his mother with eyes too wise for his age. What's going to happen, Mommy? She knelt, pressed a kiss to his forehead. We're going to do what families do. Stick together. But Evan had other plans. We can't stay, Julia. They won't stop until they burn everything to ash. You and Liam need to go. Now. And you? She asked, already knowing the answer. We'll buy you time. That's the only way. She shook her head, tears stinging. Number, I won't lose you. Any of you. Evan stepped closer, voice soft and steel-wrapped. You gave us more than shelter. You gave us a reason to fight again. Let us give something back. It wasn't fair. It never had been. But Julia understood. That morning, hidden behind the old orchard, she kissed Evan goodbye, with trembling hands and burning eyes. Liam hugged each of the soldiers like brothers. Jace slipped him a pocket knife. Reed gave him his dog tags. Cole whispered, You're the bravest kid I know. Then as the sun crested the horizon, she and Liam disappeared into the trees. The soldiers turned toward the house and waited. They never said goodbye. 3 months later, spring touched the world again. Julia and Liam now lived in a small cabin near the mountains, under new names, far from the farmhouse. No one came looking. The world moved on, unaware of the men who vanished to save a woman and her child. But she remembered. Every day. She wore the charm around her neck. Liam slept with the dog tags under his pillow. One day, while hiking a hidden trail, Liam stopped and pointed at a carving in a tree. Fresh, clean. It read, Still here, always watching, always protecting. E. Julia smiled through tears. Maybe the world hadn't ended. Maybe this was their new beginning. True love doesn't always ask to be remembered. It simply gives, even if it means vanishing into legend. The cabin was quiet now, too quiet. Julia kept her routines, morning tea, homeschooling Liam, foraging in the woods. But a part of her, an ache she never spoke aloud, lingered in every shadow. It had been months since they escaped the farmhouse, months without word from Evan or the others. And deep down she feared the worst, until the envelope came. No name, no return address, just a folded piece of paper inside, marked only with 3 words in clean, black ink. He kept it. Tucked inside was a photo, old, water-stained. Julia and Liam, taken from the porch, laughing during that soccer game. Evan must have taken it and kept it. Even while they ran, she clutched it to her chest and wept. That night she waited until Liam was asleep, then stepped outside beneath the stars. She didn't need to say anything aloud. She just closed her eyes and remembered. The warmth of Evan's hand in hers, the quiet vow he made on the back porch, his final words, let us give something back. They had. They always would. Back at the farmhouse ruins, grass had grown over the ashes. Burnt beams stood like blackened bones under a sky of iron clouds. A government cleanup crew came and went in silence, never finding bodies, only melted metal, spent cartridges, and a collapsed underground tunnel system. Long evacuated, but no soldier files were ever recovered. No funerals were held. No headlines ran stories. Because heroes like them don't make news, they become legends. Evan and his team hadn't died in vain. Their diversion gave Julia and Liam the chance to disappear, to live, and perhaps, one day, to speak the truth they all died protecting. And the alien child, still out there, safe, growing, because 6 forgotten soldiers made a choice, because one single mother dared to open her door, because sometimes the ultimate sacrifice isn't dying for the world, it's choosing to vanish from it, so someone else can live in peace. Some endings don't close doors, they open the skies. Years passed. Liam grew taller, stronger. He learned how to survive in the woods, how to disappear in a crowd, how to read coded signals and repair broken radios. But more than that, he learned why those things mattered. Because every lesson came with a story. And about 6 soldiers who weren't just warriors, but protectors. About a mother who had chosen love over fear. About sacrifice not as loss, but as a gift. Julia never stopped watching the stars. Every night before bed, she'd wrap the silver charm around her hand, close her eyes, and listen to the silence. Hoping, waiting. And then, one night, the silence broke. Liam had been outside late, stargazing with the battered old telescope Evan once repaired. Julia heard him call, not in fear, but in awe. She stepped outside and there it was, a soft hum in the air, a low glow behind the treetops. Shapes, not drones, not helicopters, organic, alien, moving like mist through moonlight. And in the center, floating just above the grass, a small figure. Feminine, luminous, familiar, the child, but no longer a child. She stepped forward, her large violet eyes fixed on Julia. She didn't speak aloud, but Julia heard her. "You kept me safe." Julia nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "No, they did." The girl looked at Liam next, her head tilting, curious. Then slowly, she offered something. A stone, cracked, pulsing with warmth. The same kind Evan once described. From her home, from where it all began. A symbol, a thank you, a farewell. And just like that, she was gone, drifting upward, vanishing into the stars like a whisper returned to the sky. Julia stood there long after the lights had disappeared, the stone warm in her hand, the wind calm as if the world had exhaled. There was no war now, no hunters, no running, only quiet, only peace. Later that night, she tucked Liam into bed, kissed his forehead, and lingered at the door. He looked up at her, his voice soft. "Do you think he knows, Evan?" Julia smiled gently. "I think he never stopped watching." She stepped outside again, sat on the porch, and looked up at the stars one more time. No noise, no fear, just a harmony in the night that hadn't been there before, a balance restored. And in that moment, Julia understood. This wasn't just her story anymore. It was theirs. Every choice, every risk, every heartbeat. Now, finally at rest. And far above, in the quiet corners of the universe, the promise they made still echoed, always watching, always protecting. Sometimes the smallest act of love is buried beneath a storm of despair, like the sound of rustling coins in a nearly empty purse, or the trembling hands of a mother who's run out of options. But fate often works in silence, placing strangers in your path when you least expect it. One watching, one struggling. Both moments from a turning point neither could see coming. It was one of those bitter, wind-swept mornings where every breath felt like it scraped your lungs. Snow clung to the cracked sidewalks in little piles, turning gray beneath the boots of people rushing in and out of the supermarket. Among them walked Emma, a young single mother with worry stitched across her face and her infant daughter nestled tightly against her chest in a worn-out carrier. Her coat was too thin. Her cheeks were red from the cold. And inside her pocket, she carried exactly $3.72, a few coins she had gathered from beneath sofa cushions, old drawers, and the floor of her car. That money was all she had left. Her baby Luna hadn't stopped crying since dawn. The last diaper was used hours ago, and Emma had no choice but to walk the mile to the store with numb fingers and a heart full of panic. Inside the store, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she paced the baby aisle, scanning the shelves. She didn't even bother looking at the large packs. Instead, she searched for the smallest one, something she could afford with the change in her hand. She found a 4-pack trial set, tucked low and half crushed. It wasn't much, but it was something. Emma walked toward the register with her head down, clutching the diapers to her chest, blocking out the stares from customers in thick jackets, chatting on phones, buying things by the cartload. She felt invisible, or worse, unwelcome. At register 3, she counted each coin slowly, her hands shaking, cheeks burning with quiet shame, as the clerk looked on with awkward patience. Behind her in line stood Daniel Thorne, though Emma didn't know that yet. Dressed in a plain black wool coat, holding nothing but a bottle of water, he watched the scene with quiet intensity. Daniel was a CEO, a self-made millionaire who owned the tech company 3 blocks away. He wasn't supposed to be here. He usually sent an assistant. But that morning, something pulled him to walk, to see people, to feel something. And as he watched Emma fumble with her coins, apologizing for the delay, whispering softly to the baby who whimpered against her chest, Daniel froze. There was something about her, the desperation, the dignity, the quiet determination to make her daughter's life better, even if it meant buying diapers with pennies. Emma took her change, just a few cents, and turned to leave, not noticing the man who stepped forward behind her. She never saw him quickly pull out his checkbook, scribble a number, and fold it neatly in half. As she walked outside into the freezing wind, trying to tuck the small diaper pack into her bag while holding Luna close, she didn't realize something had been slipped into the side pocket of her worn purse. It would take her hours to notice, but when she did, her world would change. What begins as a silent gesture can echo louder than words, especially when a struggling mother discovers that kindness has slipped quietly into her life, wrapped in mystery and ink. Emma didn't notice the check until much later. She had trudged back home in the cold. Luna finally quiet in her arms, snowflakes catching on her lashes. Their apartment was small, barely insulated, and the heater rattled more than it worked. But it was home, for now. She laid Luna in the crib, wrapped in 2 blankets, and finally allowed herself to breathe. It had been another close call, another day of just a scraping by. She unpacked the bag slowly, diapers, her receipt, and then a folded piece of paper she didn't recognize. Frowning, she opened it. Her breath caught. It was a check, made out to Emma L. Rivera, signed by Daniel Thorne, amount $10,000. Memo, for your daughter. You're not alone. She blinked, stunned, heart pounding. Was this real? Her hands trembled as she examined it again, flipping it over, checking the signature, the watermark. It was authentic and terrifying. Who was Daniel Thorne? How did he know her name? And why? Why would he do something like this? Panic crept in at first. Was this a mistake? A cruel joke? But then she remembered the man at the store, the one in line behind her, the one who had said nothing but had watched everything. She sat on the couch in silence, check still in hand, staring at the baby monitor where Luna slept peacefully for the first time in days. A part of her wanted to tear it up. She didn't want charity, but a bigger part whispered something else. You don't have to fight alone anymore. Across town, Daniel sat in his office on the 20th floor of a glass tower, a skyline behind him, and a file folder on his desk.